Hi, friend. It's so good to see you. Happy Wednesday. I hope you are having a fabulous start to your week, and I'm so thankful that you are joining us today. If you are new here, welcome. Come on in. The water's warm. The best place to be during this whole entire session is going to be the chat. It is going to be this thing over here that you see Sam and Danny and Matt and Vikram and Giacomo and Jeff. You see everybody saying hi. Join in. The water's fine. Say hi. Let us know where you're coming in from. We would love to see your name pop up over here. If you're shy, that's okay. Maybe next week you're feeling a little more brave. But I am so excited to have you here. And I'm really excited for today's guest because I don't know about you. I know that we've talked about this a little bit before in the past, but this whole AI surge that we've seen in the news, on social media, especially I know I'm seeing it in my LinkedIn feed. Maybe you are seeing it in your LinkedIn feed. It is all about AI, what AI is going to do to the workforce, Chat GPT, Chat GPT 4, the paid version of Chat GPT, just all these different versions of AI and access. And at least to me, maybe not to you, but at least to me, it can be a little bit, well, two things. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So there's that, the kind of like, where do I start? What tools are best? Kind of where's the shallow end of the pool, right? That I can kind of go into instead of cannonballing into the deep end where I might not know what I'm doing. So there's sort of the how-to part. But then there's also this other point, which is why I was really excited to talk to Martin today, is really how to implement it. So sometimes, I don't know if you get this, I know I get this, I will learn about a new tool or a feature and I'll get super excited and I'll be like, wow, that's really interesting or that's really great. I see how you could use that. But then I don't know how to apply it. I don't know how to use it in my everyday life. So I think it's really cool. And I hear about other people using it. And I think, well, I want to use it too, but I just don't know sort of where the puzzle pieces fit together. So if anything I just said resonated with you, then you're in the right place because we are going to go over all of these types of questions with Martin. If what I said did not resonate with you, and you have totally other questions about AI, or you have totally other questions about what it's going to do to the digital marketing landscape, congratulations, because this is an interactive talk, which means if you put your questions over here in the chat, we're all at the same cozy coffee shop with Martin together. We can discuss them with Martin, questions from you. So I'm not going to hog him out myself. You can talk to him too. So wherever you are, Nancy in Toronto, or Steve coming in from Charlotte, or Diane coming in from Toronto, or Raphael RC coming in from Syracuse, Mihir coming in from Dubai, wherever you are watching this, wherever you are logging in from, or if you're listening later on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, please help me welcome Martin to our coffee chat.
Hi, Kim.
How's it going, Martin? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And I'm looking at the chat. I've been staring at the chat and my eyes can't focus on it. It's really great. And it's so great to see so many people. One, I'm in Toronto, as you know. So it's great to see a lot of people from Toronto, including people I've worked with, a lot of past and I think present students from the Schulich School of Business, including Lubena, a client I worked with a long time ago, Denise, who's here. So hi, Denise. So it's great to see all of you here.
Martin, it's a party. And we're excited that you're the star of the show.
No, I think you are. I'm just, the person with the life jacket, I think.
Well, I'm really excited, and I've been looking forward to this talk all week, the last couple weeks, because like I just said, which you heard, I have just been feeling really intrigued and excited by a lot of the things that we're seeing in AI, and also at the same time feeling sort of overwhelmed and a little bit lost. And so I would love some reassurance from you. Am I alone in this? Are a lot of people feeling this way? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think, well, one, you mentioned something about the shallow end. I don't think there is a shallow end. There was, but we missed it. And we missed it because, all of a sudden, November of last year, when ChatGPT was launched, all of these things that were bubbling up slowly with generative AI suddenly exploded. And we find that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? And it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. So what I do, and this is part of my job, and I feel completely overwhelmed every single day, but try to catch up in increments by reading a lot of different blog posts or stories or articles or newsletters. I spend about 2 hours a day, believe it or not, reading, just trying to keep up and making sense of it. But there's also all these different product announcements and so much buzz and hype that it feels like all of us are just running for the generative AI bus, and we can't seem to catch up with it. And that is a little frustrating.
It's a little frustrating, and it's I would love for, for somebody like you who's kind of in this world all the time. You mentioned ChatGPT, which, as Colleen is saying, that I feel like is sort of the name brand. It's the Nike shoe, if you will. Like, we all kind of know that as like a leader in this space. But for you, who's kind of in it day in and day out, what are some other regenerative tools or programs that maybe aren't ChatGPT that you think are really interesting or helpful, or that you use a lot?
Okay, well, that's a great question. Before we do, I just want to say hello to another friend and someone I worked with, Gina, from San Francisco. Hi, Gina. Good to see you here too. Anyway, getting back to some of the tools, I find I like to try different ones just to
Mhm.
see, what each does. And being in Canada, and this is a frustration for Canadians, we don't get things the same time as you do in the US, or the same
Mm.
time as people in different countries do, in part because two of the big tech companies, Google and Meta, are fighting with the Canadian government right now over whether or not they should pay for Canadian news. And so as a result, we had Google Bard. Now it's gone. We had search generative experience for a few minutes. Now it's gone for a while. It'll be back. So you have to pay attention to where the tools are, what's available, and also the cost. Because if you start
Mm.
subscribing to too many tools, let me take a step back. Actually, if you start signing up to them and they have that first month or two free, and then you forget to cancel them, you get a terrible um, shock when you get your Visa bill or your Amex bill or whatever. So I think you want to be careful with the tools, and I like to break them down by category. So rather than picking specific tools, I start with thinking about, what do I need to do? Do I want to write?
Mm.
Do I want to
Okay.
generate ideas? Do I want to create images? And then I'll try out the tools around that.
So, what's your go-to using those examples when you want to come up with ideas, or when you are looking for images? What are your go-tos there?
Okay, so when I want to come up with ideas, I still rely on me. But if I'm taking myself out of the picture, I do like ChatGPT, the paid version. So GPT-4, I find it's really, really good. But there's a lot of
Mhm.
other freemium tools that you could use. There's one called Hyperwrite that's freemium. It was around pre-ChatGPT, and it uses a number of the models. So you get different types of answers. And if you're in marketing or communications, it was designed for that. So it really gives you the type of content that you might be looking for. Whereas with ChatGPT, there is a learning curve. There is with any AI tool. So you have to figure out, as you know, a conversation you had with Dave Burse a few weeks back, how
Yeah.
to prompt them, how to talk to them. And we can talk to people. It's not hard to talk to you or to talk to other people, but it's really difficult to talk and make ourselves understood to machines in a way that gives us what we want and need. So that's what I do for writing. For visuals, I mean, if you have access to Bing Create is free, and it uses OpenAI's DALL-E 4, and it's a good tool to get started creating images, asking for things, seeing what comes up. And all of this is test and learn. You're probably not going to get a perfect result in your first try, but sometimes you get something that's pretty good or good enough for social media, and you go, okay, I can work with this.
Well, and I feel like it's very helpful, for me, what I have found is almost like we used to type into Google silly things like, you know, when did this war start? Or, you're talking to someone and what movie was Dennis Quaid in 1993? These things you used to type into Google. I've also found that a lot of these AI models, you can also do that for images. You can also do that for creating things. It's more of having a conversation.
Yeah.
One of my biggest things that I took away from that conversation with Dave is really, and so I thought that that was super helpful. I don't know if you
Yeah,
found that as well.
I did. And it's so funny because something that I like to think about is I've been writing for a long time. I consider myself a pretty good writer. And so when I'm writing my newsletter, for example, I don't use Chat GPT. I stare at that blank screen. I get up, I walk around, I do the laundry, I do errands, I do whatever I need to do, but I'm not ready to give up that pain. And I think that's something that each of you has to ask yourself is what are you willing to give up? What do you love doing? And what are you willing to give up? Now, I also know I'm arrogant enough to believe that me, who's read the limited number of things I've read and seen, and the limited number of ideas in my head, am better than a machine that's been trained on almost the entirety of the internet at writing and thinking. But I still believe that right now. Who knows what's going to happen in 2 weeks? So I think you have to ask yourself, what do you love doing more than anything else? And what can a machine help you do? I hate doing expenses. I've always hated expenses. And if there was a chat expense, I'm sure there is an app, that you can use. That's kind of would help me because it helps with something I hate doing. But writing, I don't want to give up. Now, images is a different story because I'm a writer first. And in fact, when I wrote my first blog post, this is like 2007, so a long time ago, it was all about how it's only about words, no images, because that's what's important. And I got so many angry comments. It's like, okay, maybe I'm wrong here, but I've never been able to do a good job with images. And I find with DALL-E 2 or with Midjourney, for example, I'm able to come up with things that I wouldn't have thought of and that are
Mhm.
surprising to me and hopefully are surprising to people at the other end who are seeing them, whether in slides or, in a newsletter post or anything like that.
Well, and I feel like that element of surprise, the things that you're like, oh, they came up with this idea, Dolly came up with this idea, but like, I kind of like it, it kind of works. I feel like even just having that sort of spark, or if it doesn't work, I feel like that can be helpful as well. I'm so happy that you brought up, blogging and doing things personally. I feel like I've been able to kind of sneak AI into a lot of elements of my life. Actually, just last week, I was on a trip with my family in California, and I actually asked ChatGPT. I said, "I'm with my 70-year-old parents. What are some good sightseeing things to do that are not too strenuous?" And sure enough, like AI came back, ChatGPT came back with a list of things for us to see and do. But I'm glad that this came up because it sounds like Jeff has a similar question to me. What I struggle with is I see a lot of applications for AI when it comes to like personal, like blogs or trip planning or social media posts. But how would you introduce it more, I guess, to your work world? Like if you work at a corporation, things that you're doing there, or if you're an entrepreneur, maybe things that you're doing inside your business.
That's a great question. I think I would start by stepping back and looking at what your workflow is. Let's talk about a marketing workflow, for example. So you know that you're going to start with, if you're an agency or a consultant, you're going to start with a brief from your client. And so that brief comes in, and then you have to come up with ideas and strategies and figure out how to build those out and make them real and persuasive and exciting to the client, but not only to the client, to their customers. So, that's where you're going to start. You go, okay, where can we use AI without risking proprietary client data? So, if a client's giving you a brief for a brand new product, say, and you're using an over-the-counter system, even though you've paid for it, is there a risk that you might give things away? Yeah, there is. So you may want to hold off there. If you're doing it at the ideation session, that's great. You can use it for brainstorms to come up with those ideas without giving too much away of the, without giving too much of the proprietary data away. That's really, really important. So brainstorms are a good way of using it. Then you need to attach a person to that, to go through it and vet it and sort of say, okay, what works, what doesn't work, what's completely off the rails, and what is a lie or a hallucination that we can't use. And I can't remember who said this, but I thought this was really interesting. So in creativity, fiction is often a good thing. But if you're talking about a product and what it could do, say a new shampoo or a new car, and you start making up things, that fiction may not be so great, and it could get you in trouble with your customers. There could be lawsuits, different things like that. So you have to realize when you're using AI, when you should let it be more creative. So beginning is brainstorms. But again, you want that person there attached to it at the brainstorm level, whether that's a junior person, someone mid-level or senior, to vet it. Because AI is biased and it plays on all of our biases. So for example, if it says to me, if I'm looking for studies to kind of give me a hook for the marketing angle that I'm going to use, it says, according to Stanford University, there was a study, it did this and that. And I believe that because I trust Stanford, but AI could say, no, that study never happened, or it did happen, it happened somewhere else, the results were different. That's why the person's important. So brainstorms, maybe you're using it for coming up with a first draft or a framework or an outline of your marketing plan. You can ask it to do that. Again, through iteration, going back and forth. Don't just say, give me a marketing plan, and it will give you one. Maybe you're using it for editing down the way. But again, you need a person to be there to make sure that whatever output you're using is truthful, is in line with your brand values, and is speaking in your brand voice. And so all of this works together when you're starting to develop your process. And then I think it's really important to ask your employees where they think AI can be used and how it will help them do their jobs in a more efficient way, but maybe even in a more fun way where they can do more of the things they like to do.
We all want a little bit more fun in work. That's for sure. In the marketing example you just gave, I wanted to raise Claire's question up. When you're talking about that marketing framework as an example, which tool are you using to work with? Are you using ChatGPT?
Yes, I do. I
Okay,
like, again, the paid version of it,
the paid
GPT,
version.
the paid version. So GPT-4. And
Mhm.
Claire, hello. Claire's also a former student. So that's something we're actually going to be covering in the digital marketing strategy class I'm teaching this year, starting next week. And Claire, we only covered a bit of it because it was a year or so ago. Anyway, I think what you want to do is you want to be really specific in your prompts. And so you
Mhm.
need to say you're a marketer with, and this is something that I learned from Dave Burse. It's so great. You're a marketer with this many years experience. You've done lots of packaged goods marketing. You're an expert in, consumer technology, you're coming up with a strategy or framework for a new launch. This is what the product does. This is what you want. This is the audience you wanted to reach. Can you come up with a framework for a marketing strategy? And then, of course, you want to make refinements, because that first marketing strategy it comes up with isn't necessarily the best or even the right one or even appropriate. So you got to go back and forth and talk to it. And I mean, that's the beauty of generative AI. It's like a conversation that you have with a friend, but it is a machine and it doesn't understand you.
It is a machine. And to your point earlier, you also really have to be careful using that marketing example if you are working with proprietary information, if you're working on a product that has not been released yet. Because just like, by the way, that's why I think it's so important to really, just like you would maybe catch yourself in person, you're having lunch with a friend, I don't know, forget about the fact that you signed an NDA at work and you start gabbing about some new project that you're working on at work. Anyone would go, oh my gosh. And especially don't gab in a restaurant. You don't know who's sitting next to you or who could overhear you. I think it's important for us to remember that as we're kind of going back and forth, to your point, with whether it's Dolly or the paid version of ChatGPT or the free version of ChatGPT, I don't want to say the word unsecure because I feel like that can kind of be like a hot button when it comes to digital, but it's not private. The things that you were chatting with, if they are copyrighted or they are protected, you might want to just kind of leave that out or leave as many details out to make it as bland as possible.
Yeah, well, digital isn't private. I mean, that's something that we all have to keep reminding ourselves about. An email is not private. An email can be sent or forwarded, or someone else can find it, or it can be hacked. Something on social media, it's not private. A DM is not necessarily private. But in the same way, if you think to analog times, a diary was not necessarily private if a parent stumbled into a teenager's room and saw it and decided, oh, I better read this. So, we have to figure out, one, we have to be able to trust the other person we're talking to, but also pay attention to what's around us to know whether or not someone could overhear what we've said. I'm sure you've overheard many interesting conversations. I sure have over the years. Don't want to talk about those now, but.
Oh, absolutely. I also feel like, you mentioned Claire earlier, how she was a student in your class, or maybe is going to be a student in
Yeah.
your class. For those people who are joining, I mean, spoiler alert, we could keep Martin here for hours and hours, but LinkedIn Live wouldn't like that. So we can't do it. But, you have a lot of courses on LinkedIn Learning as well for those
Yeah.
that cannot fly to Canada and take your classes in person. Where, because you have several LinkedIn Learning courses, where do you think is a good jumping in point for someone who maybe is leaving today going like, I like that Martin guy. I'd like to learn a little bit more from him. What path do you think would be the best one to follow?
Oh, that's a great question. And I hadn't thought of that. I think a good one to start with is Digital Marketing Trends, which is a series course. So you can dip in and out of it. And twice a month, I release new videos. So that's a good one. And that ties in with the newsletter as well. Just to get a sense, you can search to see if you're interested in AI. There's videos on AI. If you're interested in social media, there are videos on social media. If you're interested in mobile, there's videos on mobile, videos on tools, things like that. So I think that's a good one. I think the generative AI course that I recorded and was released about 3 months ago, Generative AI for Digital Marketers, is also not too bad, if I do say so myself, because it explains the landscape and some of the challenges in a way that I hope people can understand, because AI is so technical and it has a lot of computer science involved in, figuring out what the algorithms are, how it works, how it's making its predictions. I am not a technical person. I did not study math or computer science, but So it's taken me a long time to try to sort through how to explain these in a way that makes sense to people. So I think that's not a bad one either.
Well, and I feel like if I kind of take a little wander over into the chat, there are a lot of conversations happening about prompts. It seems people are either stealing prompts that they've read from Dave or from other creators online. There's questions about how to make the prompts more concise or maybe more accurate to what you're asking for. So a lot of discussions around prompts. So I'm curious, for you, Martin, do you have, obviously you've been doing this for some time. Do you have maybe it's like one or two bullet points that you keep in mind, or maybe it's like a little rule of thumb that you use for yourself? But is there some like magic Martin sauce that you use when you think about prompts or kind of engaging with them on an AI platform?
The magic Martin sauce is recommending the Dave Verse Create framework, which is so good. It's one of those things, C is for character, and he goes through the whole step by step, how you come up with your character, what your request is, how, basically how you're framing it. I think my secret sauce would be, and I'm still trying to learn this, so I don't have it perfected yet. It's more like ketchup and mayonnaise. It's not Thousand Island dressing yet, but it's more like trying to figure out what I need to give a machine to get it to output what I want. Now, I keep trying that with images, and I have to say, I haven't been as successful as I want, but deadlines loom. So you go, okay, that's kind of good enough. But I think what you need to do is start to keep track of what you're doing in almost like a playbook. There is an AI influencer professor at the Wharton Business School, Ethan Mollick. I don't know if you ever read him.
Yeah.
He is fantastic. And he said what we need to start doing is keeping a grimoire, which is a word I had to look up. It's a spell book like wizards have. So with our AI prompts. So don't just like prompt and
Mm.
go away. Write it down, see what works, and then try a different version of it the next time, and then a different version, and keep building on that, because suddenly you are developing your own recipes. And that's, I think, a really good way to do it, because each of us needs our own recipes, because each of us thinks differently and has ideas differently. When I started out, yeah, no, go ahead.
I totally agree. And I was actually just talking about this at lunch with my friend the other day because I'm so glad you brought up, especially the word recipe, because what we were chatting about is I said, what happens now with cookbooks is you have these famous chefs, whether it's whoever it might be, and they sell their cookbook full of their recipes of Nutella brownies or, chicken, whatever it is. And people love the creator and then they love the recipes and they want to go home and follow the recipes. I think that like the future is going to be exactly what you said. There's going to be AI, whether it's Dave, Burris, or somebody else that you can follow and say, like, I want to buy Dave's like recipe book when it comes to using AI. I haven't seen these yet, but I that's where I think the future is going, because I think there's going to be people like me who go, I don't want to necessarily build all my own recipes when I can go copy somebody else's and their penne alla vodka tastes great.
That's a great idea, and maybe that'll save publishing or be a way of rejuvenating publishing. Not necessarily paper recipe books, although maybe they'll be like that. They'll be dusty. You'll pull them off, go, kind of enter in your spell. But I think it's a really good idea. And those recipe books, I mean, if someone creates them, they can be done specifically for different industries, sectors, whatever you need. So if you're, say, an academic, maybe you're a teacher, you teach elementary school, how do you create exercises? If you're in consumer packaged goods or consumer tech, how do you create a marketing plan, or how do you create customized ads for Instagram on it? Because the thing is, we are all starting from Ground Zero. Joel, thank you for Ethan Mollick newsletter. It's fantastic. Highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's one of those things where like we really feel like here we want to steal everybody else's homework. So if there's people that you love and you follow, like we want to love them and follow them too. I want to make sure we tackle Giacomo's question for you, Martin, which is how do you yourself think about the future of AI? And what do you think that we'll experience with it in the next, I won't say something crazy like 10 years or 5 years, but even just like in the next year or two?
Well, I feel like I'm on this weird swing that goes from optimism to pessimism and back again over and over all throughout the day. And it's really unnerving to be on this swing because part of me thinks, wow, this is really great. There's some great tools out there. And isn't it amazing that we can talk to machines and they can, I don't want to say converse back, but they can give us an output or certain things that are interesting. I think there's so much uncertainty about jobs. And because there is so much uncertainty, nobody knows whether or not they're going to be replaced by a machine. And I don't think you're going to be replaced by a machine, but as so many people have said, you may be replaced by someone who knows how to work with a machine. I read a troubling ad week story yesterday talking about how some of the big ad agencies have been doing quiet layoffs for the last 6 or 8 months. Not like tech companies that are laying off thousands of people, but quiet ones. And they're starting to hollow themselves out a little bit in maybe the middle. So that's a mid-management level. Not young people, because they need young people who know how to work the technology. Senior people, maybe they need them for strategy and relationships. And so how do you get around that? Well, one, don't bury your head in the sand. Figure out how AI works, what it does, how you can use it. Take the time to learn it. And the learning curve is steep. It really, I can speak for myself because of how technical it is, because it's based on statistical predictions. There's also all of the issues around bias, because the output is biased based on what data it's been trained on. The internet is kind of biased and isn't exactly the nicest place all the time, and kind of toxic, or it can be toxic, but can also be pretty inspiring and interesting too. So you have to balance all of that out. And then there's the other thing that we've been reading about is the existential question. Are machines going to take us over? The stuff you read about in sci-fi. I don't want to go, I don't think that's not a possibility, but I think we need to focus on the short-term issues. And I think that's one of the ways that we can get a handle on this pendulum that I was saying before, is break the issues down into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So don't say AI is never, ever going to take over from humans, because maybe it will. We don't know. Anyone who's watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, not a great model to follow. But that's in the future. What are we doing right now? And how can you use it for your organization? Can I say one thing about productivity too? There's so much talk about AI productivity. All these consulting or management consulting organizations have been doing studies. So KPMG, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, they all talk about productivity. And one of the questions that nobody seems to be talking about is relationships, because ultimately businesses want to have relationships with their customers and their employees. It's not about fast, do it. It's about how do you build those relationships. And so I think we need to shift from only talking about productivity to talk about relationships and what AI can do to help foster or improve them.
Oh, I mean, I think I'll give an example again for myself. When it comes to relationships and how AI can help, I recently had an acquaintance. It was a guy. I'm just being honest. Shopping for men for me is just terrible. I don't know. Girlfriends, my mom, my aunts, no problem. I got like a laundry list of ideas where I'm like, I could get them this, and this could be cute, and this would look great on them. Men, especially if it's not my husband or not my dad, I'm just sort of like, what do they like? What do they do? I don't know. I actually use ChatGPT and I put in, I don't want to reveal who this person is, but I put in kind of like where they lived, how old they were, maybe a few things that I thought that they liked. Like I'm like, well, I know he watches football. Like I put in like random stuff, and I said, can you come up with 3 or 4 birthday gift ideas that this person would really like? And it was actually really helpful. Like I was like, wow, that is, so I think kind of going off what you said, I think it could be interesting when people start using AI to actually making your real life relationships better. Not
Yeah,
necessarily just all about, to your point, productivity and efficiency and doing things faster and with less people, but actually using it to make your relationships with people better.
I think that's really, and
Yeah.
that's a great way of using it too. And I wouldn't have thought of it for gifts, but I'm going to borrow that from you, Kim. I actually think, in answer to what does a man want, technology or a shirt. That's usually
Or a shirt.
the go-to things.
Like Apple Watch or a shirt.
Yeah, one of those two. But no, that's a great way of doing it. And there's an app out now. It's called Pi, P-I, stands for Personal Intelligence. I think it's free.
Wow.
It's by a fairly new company, although the founders of it, one of the founders is a former founder of DeepMind, Google DeepMind, which is a big AI company. The other one is one of the founders of LinkedIn. And it's
Hmm.
called a personal intelligence. That's what PI stands for. And it's all about those kinds of conversations that you can have if you want to talk through something, if you want kind of advice, if you want to run through things. I haven't tried it for gift ideas, but I'm going to check it out for that. I think that's where we want to use AI for things that help us, and also when we're stuck. Another great use, like in marketing or communications, is when you have to come up with 20 versions of the same ad or 30 versions of something. AI is pretty good at that.
Or a blog title.
Or a
Or
blog.
like a post title. You're like, how many more times can I write this down?
Yeah. I mean, that now the flip side of that is that's how junior copywriters used to learn how to write. I had to do that when I started. I wrote the donuts to radio ads. So it was like the in-between part of a jingle with buy these tires now, they're on sale, or get your car tuned up. You know, the equivalent of that, AI would have done I would say, a much more productive job than I did.
Well, tomato, tomato. I also think that there's a little bit of value in the old school, but that's just me. I'm curious, Martin, you gave us a great tip, by the way. I cannot wait to go subscribe to Ethan's one useful thing when we hang up from here. But are there any other podcasts or newsletters that kind of cover your industry or the AI industry in general that you think are really useful or helpful?
Yes. One I think everyone should subscribe to is the Axios AI Plus newsletter. It's free. It's
Okay.
Axios has something called Smart Brevity. So they're short and they really break down 2 or 3 important stories of what's happening in AI in an easy to understand way. Once you get over the learning curve and kind of figure out who things are, comes every morning. I think that's a great newsletter to subscribe to. It's short. Flip side of that is the Lex Friedman podcast, which is incredible when you have 3 hours to spend, because they're usually
Yeah.
2 to 3 hours long, but fantastic. And if you want to get a good handle of where AI is, these are podcasts he did a couple of months ago. He does one with Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and it gave me a whole different understanding of Sam Altman's philosophy. And in fact, I started to think very differently about what OpenAI is trying to do, and much more positively about it. The other one is a guy named Eliezer Yudkowsky, who has been researching AI for 30 years, and he is the total doomsayer. So you read that and you're going to go, oh no, this is it, you know. But it's good to get both ends of the spectrum, because then you can start to see what the middle is. And the middle one is with a physicist, Max Tegmark. He wrote a great book called Life 3.0. He's a prof at MIT, and he talks a lot about beneficial AI. A lot about, and he's the person who said, you know, like when you're working with AI tools, think about what do you love to do and what do you not want to give up. If you're a songwriter, maybe you love writing songs. Why would you want a machine to do that for you? But maybe you don't like arranging them. So great, fantastic use. If you're a writer, you know, great. Maybe you have trouble with ideas. Maybe it's just that blank page that you can't get over. So you have it do a really crappy first draft. And you could ask for a crappy first draft. And you might be surprised, because maybe its version of a crappy first draft, you might say, oh, this is sort of interesting. It's a little wonky. It's a little weird. I can do something with this.
100%. I feel like these are such good resources. I'm really excited to dive into a lot of these because I haven't heard. I've heard of Flex, but some of the other ones I haven't heard of. So these are great. Okay, we around these parts, Martin, we love homework. We're kind of nerdy. We love homework around here. So if you could give us one homework assignment, something to listen to, something to download, something to read, something to watch, something to try, one homework assignment for us to do over the next week, what homework assignment would you give us?
Well, actually, and I'm kind of biased here because I'm the associate director of the Future of Marketing Institute, which is a kind of futuristic think tank run out of the York University Schulich School of Business. I would say subscribe to the Future of Marketing Institute's newsletter and LinkedIn feed, because you will get an idea not only of what's happening now, but what the implications of various AI tools, various AI developments are going to potentially cause in the future. And it's not only AI, it's all about AI, the metaverse. You know, the metaverse was so big a year ago. It's not really going to go away. It's just the order. It seems like the order of things was wrong. So Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of people were talking about the metaverse, you know, being immersed in a virtual, kind of quasi-virtual real world. But we don't have the technology there. AI, generative AI, is a great first step to get there. And then once the technology catches up, not that we have to wear these goggles, but you know, through our glasses or our screens, having kind of a virtual display in front of us, it could be pretty great. If you're a tourist somewhere, you show up at a statue and you say, okay, who is this person? And suddenly you get context and you can get more. Or, oh, where's a cafe near the statue of whatever? You know, and that's where I think it's pretty exciting. It's also exciting from a marketing perspective. How are brands going to insert themselves into that? So if you want a restaurant or a cafe, how will you know that's paid or good? You know, maybe paid and good, but so those are all considerations that I think we need to start thinking about, and that the Future of Marketing Institute covers.
Ah, I love it. Well, Martin, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. Where can people keep learning from you and following your content and learning from you, even if they don't live in Canada?
Well, LinkedIn, I think, just, you know, follow me on LinkedIn, or if you're on here, connect with me, but just say, you saw Coffee with Kim, you know, let's connect, rather than just sending a request. So that's a good way of doing it. My newsletter and my website, which is just 3Ws, my name, martinwaxman.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Martin, and thank you, everyone, for joining today. As Jeff said, this is amazing with the AI being the
Amazing.
amazing part. Really appreciate your time and attention today. I'm glad we got to dig into all of this AI stuff together. Next week, we will be diving into all things public speaking. So I look forward to seeing you there. So thank you again, Martin, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks, everyone.
Bye.